Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Gia. I'm a 26-year-old lady who lives in my mom's basement, and this is the March wrap-up. In the month of March, I read 10 books and I DNF'd one, so that brings our 2023 DNF counter to 2, but 10 books in a month is the best that I have had all year. February was an abnormally short list just because I spent so long of it sick and I didn't get a lot of reading done, but March I rebounded and I had a lot of really good books in March. Starting off strong with Foul Lady Fortune. I know I talked about this at the end of the February wrap-up, but I technically finished this on March 1st. Again, amazing. I loved it. It is a historical fantasy slash romance slash espionage spy book about a young woman who is an immortal assassin who has to go on a job and get married to somebody that she doesn't really like for the job in order to infiltrate a potential communist outpost, and she is on a journey of revenge against the people who turned her into an immortal being. This is actually set in the same universe as These Violent Delights, and I did not know that, so I don't know how that escaped me, but I found that out, and I will have to go back and read These Violent Delights a lot sooner than I thought that I would. But this is excellent, and having read it isolated from These Violent Delights, which is also a very well-known duology, this is excellent. The next book that I read in March was The Atlas Six by Olivia Blake. This is about 6 individuals who are contacted by a Men in Black type figure who is asking them to join this secret society called the Alexandrian Society. It is this group of individuals who has kept the Library of Alexandria alive. It actually continues to exist, and they hold this library full of the mundane and the magical arts. So in this world, people do have powers. You can or you cannot have them, and they're all different. These individuals were selected because they had 6 very rare, very powerful abilities that were wanted by the Alexandrian Society. So all 6 of them go to this fellowship of sorts. They have a year to learn a lot about how the society works and about each other's powers and how they all work together. And then they find out that one of them will have to be sacrificed at the end of their 1 year in order for the 5 of them to ascend. In between, some shenanigans happening with people trying to get into the Alexandrian Society and poach some of their secrets as they are trying to find out why they want to keep these secrets secret, and also what do the other societies want with them, and are they really as evil as they are being told that they are. What I will tell you about the Atlas Six and Olivia Blake's writing is that I have been a fan of Olivia Blake since she was writing fanfiction on fanfiction.net. She was primarily in the Dramini circle on in Harry Potter fanfiction, which is the Draco and Hermione pairing. Olivia Blake was one of the most popular fanfiction writers in this circle and wrote some of the most popular stories with this pairing. I was already familiar with her style of writing going into her books. She writes in what I would consider purple prose. She talks herself in circles, and she uses a lot of words that you probably would not see outside of a thesaurus. I do catch myself having to Google search some definitions. Every character in this book believes they are the smartest person in the room. Everybody is very pretentious. Everybody is very full of themselves. They all talk in riddles and layers, and everything has a double, triple meaning, and it's very, I don't want to say convoluted, but I think that it is very dense for some people. In no way would I ever call somebody dumb for not understanding a style of writing, but there is a huge difference between writers who write in a more accessible way that sounds more like everyday talking, like a lot of contemporary authors write in a more everyday style writing that is very easygoing to read, versus what you would consider capital L literature, like Charles Dickens, Jane Austen, capital L literature. There is a difference. Some people like one, some people like the other, some like both. I would consider this leaning more towards the capital L literature style of writing. If you are not into overly descriptive forms of writing that talks itself in a circle where everything links back to philosophy or has a philosophy or a meaning or such, this is not going to be for you. However, I rated the Atlas 6 5 stars because I loved it. I actually do tend to write more purple when I write, and I think that Olivia is an excellent writer. So if you're not into that, it might not be for you. I would suggest that you pick it up because it is an excellent book. There is less plot as there is character interactions between the people, because this is six strangers who come together and learn that one of them will have to be sacrificed by the other five. So there is more, backstabbing and alliances made and broken and little white lies and secrets and everything that they learn about each other because it's about them. It is also about the greater plot, but this book focuses very much in detail on like the micro relationships between everybody else. It has everything under a microscope. And if you are into that, then you will love the Atlas 6. The next book I read was The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner, another 5-star read. Oh my God, I'm screaming, crying, and throwing up. So if anybody who knows me in real life, my field that I was educated in college was archaeology, specifically bioarchaeology and historical archaeology. It's what I went to graduate school for. Fortunately, didn't finish my master's degree, but I will someday. But I have been on the hunt for something that really makes me feel how my studies made me feel, because bioarchaeology is all about learning and interpreting somebody's life from their body, and historical archaeology is all about reinserting those lost perspectives of history back into the greater scope of world history. So while history is usually written by the victors, the rich, and by the literate, all those perspectives that are lost, the poor, the illiterate, the women, the children, the slaves, those are all lost. So I was extremely interested in reading this. It is about a woman named Caroline who goes on her 10-year anniversary trip alone because she finds out that her husband has been cheating on her. She goes on a random spelunking trip along the Thames in London, and she finds a small apothecary bottle, and she is compelled to do more research on it. Upon later discovery, she finds that the bottle was linked to an 18th century story about a apothecary killer, and she is wanting to discover more about this. The other two perspectives of this story take place in the 18th century. We have a woman in her 40s named Nella who took over an apothecary shop from her mother that she has worked in all of her life. While she used to specialize in tinctures and small cures for ailments, these days she has become an advocate for women who are seeking for permanent solutions for abusive husbands, brothers, and fathers, and she has closed up the public part of her shop to have a secret apothecary in the back that dispenses lethal poisons. The third perspective is a 12-year-old girl named Eliza who goes to Nella on behalf of her mistress, seeking to get rid of her abusive husband. And we see in real time the unraveling of the lives of Nella and Eliza, and then the rediscovery of their lives through Caroline's eyes. Caroline is rediscovering Nella and Eliza, and this is what was so compelling to me, because as an archaeologist specializing in what I do, you are rediscovering these people. You are giving them back their agency, where when you're looking at a skeleton, you might not know their name if it is an unmarked grave or the graves have since deteriorated and are gone or illegible. You are rediscovering these people that, although they may be 100 to 500 years old, like the skeletons I excavated in Romania 5 years ago, these are still people. You are giving them back respect, you are giving them back agency, and you are telling their story with voices they no longer have. And that is what I found the most compelling about this, is that it gave me the same feeling that I felt when I was doing that myself. And I loved it. I loved it so much. It was during March where I kind of had this seesaw effect between 5 stars, 3 stars, and 5 stars and 3 stars. So to expand on that further, the next book I read was A Court of Frost and Starlight. I rated it 3 stars. Not to rehash a lot of my What I've Been Reading Lately video that I posted about 2 weeks ago, but A Court of Frost and Starlight is almost completely useless, save for a few things. It was basically ACOTAR Christmas. It felt like the Christmas Prince Hallmark movie. But at the same time, there were a couple of nuggets that were very important, like featuring more time with Cassian and Nesta and Elaine and Azriel and Lucian. But there was also specifically a conversation between Feyre and Rhysand about wanting to start their family. And what I find extremely important about this is that this is not something that is heavily featured in anything romance, where pregnancies are almost always accidental. And it's then that you have the conversation of, do we want kids? How many kids do we want? Are we ready to have children? And to have this conversation beforehand, I think is extremely important, because that is a conversation you have to have in real life with your partner about whether or not you want kids, because you shouldn't enter a long-term relationship with somebody on something that important that you disagree on. Because if one person wants kids and the other doesn't, that's very complicated. That's a very important topic. To see this conversation between the two of them where they mutually agree that they are ready to start trying for their family was incredibly important. I also think that it promotes safe sex practices in fantasy, because a lot of times in media, especially in the early 2000s, with pregnancies being accidental and the whole teen mom and the secret life of the American teenager, safe sex is not taught. There was a time where books and media both reflected that abstinence was the best policy when it came to safe sex practices, and that it's just not realistic. So to see, especially in fantasy, the rise in authors including contraceptive spells, potions, things that they can take that exist in universe that are considered a form of birth control or a safe sex practice, I think is extremely important, because inevitably these books will land in the hands of people who may be a little young, but also should be knowledgeable about these practices. So I was extremely impressed by this. I can't believe that I read it in an ACOTAR book, but I was impressed by this. However, everything else was bad about it, so I gave it 3 stars. Next was Between Wrath and Mercy by Jess Wisecup. This book had me screaming, crying, and throwing up, because this is a one-clown circus starring me, and my personal life is an absolute mess. This book broke my heart into a million pieces and then rebuilt it back up and filled in all the cracks. It was so goddamn good. I'm screaming. This book takes place in a universe where there is the potential, when you are born, to be bestowed a gift from the 4 gods, and each god specializes in something different. I only remember the god of chaos and the god of healing and fertility, but they can grant you these powers from one of them, but you can have powers from more than one god. And randomly, at any time, there are individuals that pop up that are blessed with powers from all 4 gods, and they are called the beloved and the accursed, and they don't have to exist at the same time. They are quite random, and these individuals are confirmed and identified by the religious sect, which is really just temples full of priestesses that confirm whether you are the beloved or the accursed. And the different rival kingdoms who share this religious belief kind of keep tabs on each other to when these individuals show up, because they are powerful pawns. But our main character, Emmeline, is a 32-year-old woman who was the twin sister of the former beloved who passed away when they were 16 years old. Her sister was engaged to marry the crown prince of Vesta, which is the kingdom that they live in, and unfortunately for Emmeline, she was in love with her twin sister's betrothed. But also good news, her sister was in love with somebody else, so I guess it evens out. After her sister dies, the two part ways, and 16 years later, Emmeline has married somebody else, and she has a 15-year-old daughter named Elora, who she believes is the new beloved. She has raised her child in secret because she is afraid that the same thing will happen to her that happened to her twin. So when her daughter is kidnapped by a rival kingdom, Emmeline has to go to her crown prince, which was her first love 16 years ago, and ask him for help to get her daughter back. And so throughout this journey, the two of them learn to love each other again and learn to trust each other again. And it is a story of getting your first love back, and it is a story of redemption. But it came to me at the right time, and I cannot wait to read the sequel. I'm reading so many good books lately that it makes me want to change my lineups, but I have to remain strong. Next is The Luminaries by Susan Dennard. I was extremely disappointed by this book. I did not really like it as much as I wanted to. If I wanted to kind of sell you the vibe of what The Luminaries felt like by comparing it to other things, I would say that it's like Monster Hunter and Silent Hill, but a less scary Silent Hill with a splash of the Addams Family. So this is a YA book about a forest that emits a mysterious mist where monsters spawn in it. It is outside of a small, isolated community that rotates turns defending each other from the forest and the monsters that come out at night. And every family kind of specializes in something different. They all have their own estates, and they all again, specialize in something different, but they all rotate, taking charge of protecting each other from the forest. So you have the Mondays, the Tuesdays, the Wednesdays, the Thursdays, the Fridays, the Saturdays, and the Sundays. They all are important to the community in some way. A lot of this is not explored directly, but like, for example, the Saturdays are extremely important, and also the Sundays are extremely important. The Tuesdays were the best hunters, and the Fridays were the poorest for some reason. The Saturdays were like the celebrities, and the Sundays were like the mayor, I think, or the teachers. I don't quite remember. I think the Saturdays were the mayor and the Sundays were the teachers, is I think how that worked. So our main girl, Winnie Wednesday, was trying to win back favor from her community after her dad was outed as a witch, which is again not something very well explored. So there is a sequel coming out that I might be interested in reading, but for the time being, I was extremely disappointed in how little was explored in this, because it did introduce some interesting concepts that I think would have been done really well. But I think the conclusion of this complaint is to say that it should have been bumped up from YA to new adult, because I got really tired of the teenage antics and the romance that didn't make any sense as to why it was there in the first place. Also, I think it would have increased the stakes. If you're focused on reinstating your family's social status, I think the stakes are even higher if you make the character older, because you can introduce the idea that they are struggling to get a job, or they can't go to a good school, or something like that. Like, I think that it introduces ideas of institutional poverty, and I think that this could have been explored a lot better, but maybe I'm just asking too much and I should have just sat down and enjoyed it, but I didn't. I think there was really more that could have been done here, and what was done here was not done very well. Next was The Poison Season. I rated this 4.5 stars. It was excellent. If I could compare it to two things that already exist, I would compare it to Midsummer and Lord of the Flies. It is about a small community that lives on an island in the middle of a poisonous lake, and there is a forest that they have to regularly make sacrifices to. They also have this magical ability with their singing voices, in that they sing to the forest, and the singing is attractive to animals and to people who do not have these powers. They are called Encantu, which means that I guess they can't sing. Not everybody is born with this power, however, and our main character, Lilo's little brother, is sent away when he is 12, which is the deadline. So I think you had to be like somewhere in the middle of your 12th year, but if you do not grow those powers, they send you away because you don't belong in the community. And also, their singing magic can get you killed by the forest, which is anthropomorphic and bloodthirsty. I found a lot of religious imagery in this book, but there was a boy that accidentally got across the lake, and all the ice had melted from the winter and he got stuck there. So our main character, Lilo, keeps him safe and secret because she is sympathetic to the idea that outsiders are not all bad people. However, her aunt and her cousin have a lot of animosity towards outsiders and believe that they are the good people, like the only good people in the area. So there's a lot of familial conflict. And it is through this budding romance with the boy who is an outsider that Lilo realizes that their community is really, really toxic, and it is all about breaking family ties and getting away from this. It reminded me of people leaving abusive and extremely religious families, like people who exit Christian fundamentalist groups, people who risk being shunned by their family because they leave. I think the best example of this would be people who leave the Scientology community, who become shunned by their former community members and from their families, and they can no longer talk to them. They're excommunicated and they're on their own. I think that this did a really good job at showing implicit cult behavior. I wish it was a little bit more explicit, but I think that this was done quite well. And I think that this is another example of a book that needs to be read by high schoolers and dissected, because I think that this was very well done. The next book I read was Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. I rated it 3 stars. It was kind of meh. It was alright. It felt very Hogwartsy at some points, because there was a lot of magic learning, and there was a hut that Alina had to go to that reminded me of Hagrid's hut. I don't know, maybe being a Harry Potter girl just made a permanent mark on my life that I don't know. Anyway, now to finally talk about books that I haven't already talked about, but Kingdom of the Wicked by Carrie Maniscalco. I rated this, I believe, 3.75 stars, rounded up to 4. I loved the vibes. I was there for the vibes. I think this is the first book I have ever read that has taken place in Sicily. For those who don't know, I am half Sicilian. My mother's side of the family does come from Sicily. I think this is the first book I've ever read that took place explicitly in Sicily, and it took place in the 19th century, which is when my mother's family immigrated to the United States, roughly. Like, roughly, I think 1902 was when they immigrated. I don't know. Let's ask mom. It was 1907, so turn of the century, plus or minus 20 years. It was around the same time as my mother's family immigrated to the United States. I don't really know what I was expecting when I walked into this. I thought that it would be a little bit more heavy on the romance and the smut. Because there was none. Not that I really remembered. Like, there was like little snippets of this could get steamy later. I'm assuming that the later books really dial it up, is what I've heard, actually. But I didn't really know what I was expecting. But I was just there for the vibes, honestly. I think that Carrie Maniscalco does a really, really good job on her imagery when it comes to food and when it comes to floral things. There was a lot of detail put towards Amelia's wish to become a cook and her cooking in her family restaurant and what she wants to do and open her own restaurant and how she wants to do it and change it. But there was also a lot of specific detail when it came to Amelia's family being Striga, which I find funny because a Striga in The Witcher is a monster, but it also means witch in other languages. It is kind of a cross-linguistic word where it means different things in different languages. But their family are Striga, and they were very specific about the things you need to summon this prince of hell and this prince of hell. They were all different, and they all correlated to who they were, and I thought that this was very well done. I think that this was very vivid. I think when it came to imagery, that Carrie does a really good job with this. What I didn't really like is the fact that I was getting the Arya Stark effect, in that I felt like Amelia teleported all over the island. Like, I understand it's a very small island, but I felt like she teleported all over the place and that events just kept happening to her and that she wasn't making the events happen. Does that make sense? Where it felt like in season 7 of Game of Thrones, where Arya was just teleporting all over Westeros and there was no scenes or episodes dedicated to her traveling from one place to the next. She was just in Winterfell and then she was in King's Landing. Ma'am, you went from Scotland to London. You need to kind of talk about your journey there. Anyway, I really enjoyed it. For its faults, I was just kind of there for the vibe. I enjoyed it a lot. Next was a DNF. It was Den of Vipers. Are we shocked? Who's shocked? 'Cause I'm not shocked. When I entered the Den of Vipers, I really, really thought that it was just going to be camp. That it was just going to be a fun time. That we were just going to have fun and be in a polyamorous relationship. It was going to be very fanficky. I was just going to give it a shot, see what it was like. I got to 18%, and then I realized, oh, it's just bad. And then I stopped reading it. I said I could be reading something better. And then I started reading the next book, The Cruel Prince, which I rated 5 stars because it is immaculate. This was technically a reread. I read this for the first time during the 2020 lockdown. I hadn't read for fun in years, and my friend told me, hey, if you're looking for a new book to pick up to pass the time, here's a book that I can let you borrow. And I absolutely loved it. I tried to read it slowly so that I didn't speed through it, but I loved this book. I went and I picked up the trilogy at Barnes & Noble, and I started reading The Wicked King, but I never finished it. And I decided to pick it back up and read it again. And it is just as excellent the second time. What I can say about Holly Black is that she is another example of an author who does an excellent job with her vivid imagery. Everything in this universe is colorful and bright, and not always in color, but it's like you could see it in your head that it emits an image that cannot be mistaken. Holly Black is very, very good at this. What she's also really good at doing is inventing side characters that are all unique. I don't think there was an instance of any secondary character, even just a servant, that looked like another one. There was no point in which somebody looked like somebody else. It really emits this image that fairyland is incredibly unique, that nobody looks alike. I think the best example is like the 6 children of the king. They all have a different feature. They all have something different, whereas they have a different animalistic thing. Like Carden has a tail, and none of his other brothers or sisters have a tail. So I think that it really shows not just how fairy are different from humans, but also how fairy are different from each other. And I thought that this was awesome. It was very magical, very whimsical. Now that I've grown and I've already read it, so I was paying more close attention to what the world building, and I was paying closer attention to the specifics, and I was blown away a second time. So I really like this. This is good shit. Book Talk actually was onto something. Also, I read this before it was popular on Book Talk, which means that if I was more on TikTok, I probably could have gotten popular because I would have been talking about this as well with everybody else. Probably a missed opportunity on my part, but it's okay. Anyways, that is all from me today. Thank you so much for hanging out with me if you made it to the end of this video. If you'd like to find me anywhere else, you can find me on Twitch, Twitter, and Instagram. I am doing my best to catch up with my Bookstagram reviews, and it's a work in progress, to say the least. Remember to drink water and be nice to each other and exude kindness and empathy with everything that you do, and I will see you in the next video.